Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast from the regular season finale. The Timberwolves fell to the Bulls by 4, but that wasn't really the story. The story was the Timberwolves' decision to rest Karl-Anthony Towns, rest D'Angelo Russell, get down by 28 points in a game where they really weren't competitive at all for the entire first half. And then all of a sudden, the Timberwolves bench, Leandro, Bolmaro, Nate Knight, Jake Layman, Joshua Kogi, all these guys came roaring back and made a game out of it. We're going to break it down, as well as the decision to rest players, all here on the show tonight. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Happy Monday, everybody. It's not a victory Monday, but that's all right, because we have a playing game to look forward to on Tuesday. More on that later. Got a lot to cover here today on the show. First of all, thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube now, as well as all of your favorite platforms, audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. Also a quick plug, doing postcasts, live postcasts, quick 10, 12-minute postcasts over at the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. The great Ron Johnson, former Golden Gopher football player and NFL draft pick for the Baltimore Ravens, is hosting his own show there on the channel. And then myself and the hosts of all the other Locked On Minnesota shows are doing live postcasts. So I've got Chalanga Langason from Zone Coverage and the C&D NBA podcast on that show. So we've already gotten the live postcast up. You can find it both on YouTube as well as on this feed. If you're listening on any other audio platform, you can find the postcast. If you want the quick takes from myself and Chalanga, go ahead and listen to that. Be sure to go live with us following Tuesday's game as well. All right, let's get into the good stuff here on the show. The Timberwolves came into the game. Karl-Anthony Towns was listed as out due to rest as early as, I guess, on Saturday. They were saying he was out due to rest. D'Angelo Russell was questionable due to a non-COVID illness. And as we got into the day on Sunday, it looked like D'Lo might play. And then they just decided to hold him out, but he was on the bench. So obviously the illness is not a factor anymore. So essentially D'Lo and Towns both missing for rest. The Bulls resting the majority of their starting lineup, including, of course, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, among others. This game did not matter to either team. The Timberwolves are locked into the 7th seed. The Bulls are locked into their spot in the East. So this was a game that really didn't matter. However, it was fan appreciation night. Timberwolves at home at Target Center. There's also this kind of, and this is my first segment I like to do key takeaway from the game. This was a weird game in that neither team was playing starters for the most part of it. The Timberwolves didn't play any starters in the second half of this game, any preferred starters, or actually any starters from this game even in the second half. So, I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about the Timberwolves down the stretch, but I want to start the show by talking about the decision to rest Towns and Russell and my thoughts on that. And here's why. I'm recording this right after Luka Doncic left the Dallas Mavericks game on Sunday with a calf strain. Now, calf strains can be anywhere from extremely minor to a multi-week injury. The Mavs don't play again until Saturday, so he's got essentially 6 days to get ready to play on Saturday. But no doubt it hampers the preparation. And in light of that, that makes this even more important of a conversation, I think. Now, I don't think that this necessarily swings it either way, right? Because it's a risk reward. The whole thing's risk and reward. Like the cons, I should say, minuses, cons, however you want to say it, to Towns not playing and D'Lo not playing is that the Wolves hadn't played since Thursday. So now they have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off before playing Tuesday. So that's an extended layoff. You don't get 4 days off consecutively during the season, except for the All-Star break, or if you're sitting out for rest for any other reason, which Towns has not done all season. So I don't believe, pretty confident without going back and looking, I don't think outside of he missed a game here and a game there due to some minor things, and obviously the games he missed due to COVID, but it's not like he ever had multiple, he wasn't sitting out for a rest day like Patrick Beverley would do occasionally, where you see other stars around the league do. So it's an unusually long layoff for Towns. Now we're talking 4 days. We're not talking a week. D'Angelo Russell, we know of course, Towns has the banged up wrist. He's had stuff all season. We know that. D'Angelo Russell, his knees have kept him out. His ankles have kept him out at times this season. So he probably needs the time off his feet. The risk reward, Chris Finch no doubt thought, hey, we could gain some momentum by playing these guys, um, or continue some momentum after losing, what was it, 4 out of 7 or 5 out of 8 or whatever it was for the Timberwolves recently. Since then, they'd won 3 out of 4, and this was a chance to win 4 out of 5 and go into the playoffs on a small winning streak and on a positive note. But the risk is far too great. Any injury to Karl-Anthony Towns or D'Angelo Russell would have, I mean, destroyed all hopes of winning in the play-in and getting into the first round of the playoffs and making noise. And the risk of not playing them is they could have still won. They almost did. The other thing is, even if they had played, they wouldn't have necessarily been guaranteed a victory. I suppose basically they would have, since the Bulls were resting most of their starters. But it's not like this was an all or nothing type thing for the Wolves. They still did play Anthony Edwards. They still did play Patrick Beverley, Malik Beasley, Jaden McDaniels, Jared Vanderbilt. All these guys were still in the lineup. And the Wolves felt pretty good about, Naz Reid's a pretty good player. They have good depth. And so the Wolves decided that the risk reward, clearly the move was to not play the starters. And I'm okay with that. On the postcast with Chilenga on Thursday, we discussed the Wolves need to go into this to try and win because it's important to maintain momentum. That was before we knew the Bulls wouldn't be playing anybody either. I think in response to the Bulls doing that and knowing that this game ultimately didn't matter and the team had generally been playing well, um, nobody's going to look at this and say, what an abomination, they lost by 4 to the Bulls. Now, the first half, we'll get to this, was an abomination. It was really bad. They were down 23 at halftime. There was no urgency from guys that are going to be in the rotation in the playoffs, Anthony Edwards, Patrick Beverley, and others. Well, Pat Bev's another story. We'll also talk about that. But at least Anthony Edwards, Malik Beasley, among others. But at the end of the day, you don't want the Luka Doncic situation. And I don't cover the Mavs. I don't know the whole ins and outs of why he would or wouldn't play outside of, I mean, man, calf strain, final game of the season, going into the playoffs, not good, right? So this makes me feel that much more validated in arguing that the Timberwolves did the proper thing by resting these guys. Now 4 full days of rest to take on the Clippers on Tuesday. The Wolves and Clips have known this since I think Friday that this matchup was locked in officially. And so both teams are already deep into their scout and getting ready. Remember, they've only played once since December, and that was a game when a lot of the team's starters didn't play. No Karl-Anthony Towns for the Wolves. I don't believe D'Angelo Russell played in that game. No Paul George, no Ivica Zubac, among others, for the Clippers in that Timberwolves win in January. December, these teams were different. Coming up later this week, tomorrow on Tuesday's show, I'm going to talk to Ron Johnson of the aforementioned Locked On Minnesota podcast about the matchup. I'm also going to talk to Chuck Mockler of Locked On Clippers, do a crossover episode to break down the matchup. So all your Wolves Clippers coverage is coming up on Tuesday. I just wanted to give a little bit of, and also, by the way, the postcast that Chilenga and I did on Sunday, we talked briefly. We spent about 3-4 minutes talking about Wolves Clippers and what to look for. So there's a little bit out there already, but all that's coming Tuesday. So I'm not going to not cover it. I just want to spend the rest of today's show talking about Wolves Bulls, but we'll get to all that on Tuesday. And of course, the post-game podcast following Wolves Clippers on Tuesday as well. All right. Next, I do want to talk Wolves Bulls. I want to talk about what happened with the Wolves reserves late in the game, who played extremely well, who stuck out to me, what my key takeaways were, and then we'll do individual studs and duds as we always do. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. This is the time of year that many folks have given up on all their New Year's resolutions, but for me, not this year. I'm not giving up. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution, though, because I actually truly enjoy eating Built Bars. I had a blueberry muffin Built Bar today, and it was phenomenal. By the way, have you tried the puffs? They just came out with a brownie batter built puff. It's a marshmallow. It's a protein-infused marshmallow, really. They're all fluffy. They're all marshmallow. All the puffs are. They taste like a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Again, the brownie batter was phenomenal. You can get yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. There's tons of puffs to choose from. You can go to built.com and scroll down to the macros chart to take a look at all Built Bars. You'll be absolutely blown away by the macros. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars have just 130 calories. They have only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which often has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Mint brownie, coconut almond, plenty of delicious flavors. There's new flavors coming out all the time. At Built Bar, they really are all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and then they figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, one more thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen. It is truly appreciated. For your next listen, you can check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. We'll carry this through the playoffs as well. Locked On Now is free and available wherever you get podcasts. It's the best way to get caught up on the night's action, especially regular season slates, but same thing for the playoffs. If you're locked in on the Wolves play-in on Tuesday's maybe not the best example, but still, if you want to get the Clippers perspective, the other play-in game Tuesday, the play-in games Wednesday, the rest of the week into the playoffs, the best way to get your fix and understand what happened without just looking at box scores or scrolling Twitter, watching highlight shows, whatever that might be, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Okay, let's talk key takeaways from Wolves Bulls, and I do have some. Number one, complete lack of urgency in the first half, and perhaps this goes without saying. If you watch this game, I don't need to tell you. Um, I'm trying to break down the game and analyze, maybe give a different look at things, but like if you watch the game, you knew the Timberwolves did not try in the first half. Like hardly anybody was even putting forth effort. The Wolves tried to get Malik Beasley going early with a lot of sets for Malik. He only made one of his first 3 or 4 shots, or actually, I think for the game, he only made like 1 3. I'm gonna make sure that he made 2 threes, 2 of 6, but he missed like he made like one of his first 4. Those were running multiple play sets to try and get him open. It did not work. And ultimately, it was just a bad start to the game. Again, no urgency for the Timberwolves, really disappointing. At halftime, the Wolves were down by 23. They were down 12 or 11 or 12 at the end of the first quarter, 23 at halftime. And then the Wolves, I should mention right before halftime, Patrick Beverley was ejected. Long story short, he was correct on an out of bounds call, protested, got a technical. The Wolves did challenge. He was right. Next play down the court, Beverley scores on a nice kind of double pump fake step through move in the paint, flexes, knows that the official's right there. I'm blanking on his name. David Guthrie, that's who it is. I couldn't think of it in the postcast earlier. Flexed in front of him, said something to himself. I don't think it was to the official. David Guthrie did not appreciate that Pat Bev did it right in his face. Beverly knew what he was doing, even if it wasn't directed at the official. He gets ejected. As he's walking off, yells that he's trash, yells that Guthrie's trash, walks towards him. Hopefully it's just a fine and doesn't affect the playoffs. It's just vintage Pat Bev to get ejected in a game that literally does not matter. And they were down 20 plus at the time. At any rate, none of the Wolves starters played in the second half. No Jared Vanderbilt, no Jaden McDaniels, no Malik Beasley. I don't think Naz Reid played in the second half. He might have started the second half, but did not play. None of the rest of them played the rest of the way. And the Wolves all of a sudden became competitive in the third quarter. Those guys that were on the floor wanted to play well. They wanted to earn more minutes. Your Jordan McLaughlin's, your Josh Okogis, those guys played extremely hard early in the third. By the end of the third quarter, the Wolves were actually making things interesting. And it was a lineup that included Leandro Bolmaro, Greg Monroe, who, of course, is making his Timberwolves return after being fantastic in a couple of games late December. Jake Layman played really well late in this game. And McKinley Wright played the final few minutes, was pretty good defensively, didn't do much at all offensively. To me, the most impressive thing, my second takeaway, was Leandro Bolmaro and also Nate Knight, who I hadn't mentioned yet, but Nate Knight and Leandro Bolmaro were both revelations late in this game. Earlier this season, Leandro Bolmaro looked, I think tentative would be the nice way to put it. He certainly, I don't think he looked overwhelmed or scared or anything, but very tentative offensively at the NBA level. Teams were, remember when he was briefly in the rotation back at the end of November, I guess it was early December. The Wolves had a couple of injuries. Bolmaro was all of a sudden in the lineup, had played great defense, played in that, I think he played in the Miami Heat game right around Thanksgiving, then played in the Charlotte game and I think a game against the Sixers. And he was effective defensively, but he was so tentative and hesitant on offense. He couldn't make an open shot. Teams were essentially playing 5-on-4 and daring him to shoot open threes, and he couldn't make them. So he never regained a rotation spot the rest of the way, and the Wolves didn't need him to. He played really well in the G League when he got his chance, but just was very tentative at the NBA level. It didn't look like that in this game. He looked entirely confident. I don't know if it's because they were already down 20 plus or nearly 20, high teens they were down when he came into the game. I don't know if it's because he knew the game didn't matter, or maybe he's just that much more comfortable now in the regular season finale of his NBA, his rookie season in the NBA. Young guy coming over from Europe and or from playing in Europe, obviously from Argentina, but from playing in Europe last year, and very comfortable. 11 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, shot 4 of 9, made his only 3-point attempt, got to the line, knocked down a pair of free throws, was okay defensively. He actually, when the Wolves got within 1 in the final minute, he got blown by, I forget who the Bulls guard was, but just an absolute blown, it's like he was shading the Bulls player to his right hand, assuming he'd have help. There was no help. It was a straight line drive to the basket to make it a 3-point game. The Wolves never got closer in the final minute. That was a completely terrible play from Bolmaro. But offensively, he was very comfortable. His 4 assists, at least 3 of them, were beautiful dimes in the paint. A couple of nice pocket passes in pick and roll game. Impressive display from Leandro Bolmaro late in this game, really for the entire fourth quarter. So I mean, that's one of my takeaways is how good he played. And then my last one's Nate Knight. We know that Nate Knight's a rotation big in this league. He's probably best suited to be like your fourth big. Maybe it's 8 to 12 minutes on any given night. He can play more if needed due to foul trouble or whatever. But 17 and 8 plus 3 assists, only 1 turnover in 16 minutes, shot 7 of 12, knocked down a 3-pointer on 3 attempts, had a poster dunk, a couple of really nice offensive rebounds, fought through traffic. Just a really impressive all around performance. We saw that late December. Again, the same time Greg Monroe played well for this team and Jalen Noel started his breakout this season, was back in late December. And that was this game. I mean, Nate Knight knew that the rest of the game was his. The final 16 minutes of this game were his. He was going to be the focal point of what the Wolves were doing. He even brought the ball up the court a couple of times and was in attack mode and played fantastic basketball. He's on a two-way deal. He was on a two-way deal with last year with Atlanta, so he's going to be looking for an actual NBA deal next year. And I don't know if that's in Minnesota or not. I mean, seems somewhat unlikely because you've got Jaden McDaniels, you've got obviously Naz Reid, who the Wolves could move on from. They've got Jared Vanderbilt under contract. Interesting to see what the decision there looks like with Nate Knight. If he potentially could take a Naz Reid spot, or if he ends up elsewhere on an actual guaranteed salary. But there's plenty of time to talk about that later. But this was a great game for Nate Knight. He's going to leave a positive impression on the Timberwolves and the rest of the league, really, with this performance. And he was playing for a job next year. Remember, I don't believe he's eligible to play in the play-in. I'm not sure about playoff games. I would assume that he wouldn't be eligible to play in those either. But I mean, still interesting or a really impressive performance from Nate Knight here in the regular season finale, and again left a very positive impression on all Timberwolves fans. Okay, let's close this thing by talking individual studs and duds. We'll put a bow on it, put a bow on the regular season. There's also plenty more time to recap. I don't want to get too philosophical about the season yet because there's hopefully a lot of basketball yet to be played. So that'll happen later, but we'll just put a bow on this one and move on from there. First, though, let's talk about the title sponsors of today's show, and that's our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. By the way, the Timberwolves are 2.5-point favorites, according to BetOnline.net, on Tuesday night against the Clippers in the play-in, the 7-8 game. 2.5 feels about right. My prediction, I should have said this before I said it's 2.5. I would have thought it would be right around 2 points. So I might have been a little low on that even. 2.5 feels good. That feels about like the right line. Of course, none of the 4 games between the Wolves and Clippers earlier this year were particularly close. But a playing game should be close with both teams at relatively full strength. Should be a ton of fun. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's close today's show by talking individual studs and duds from Wolves, Bulls. For the Timberwolves, pretty easy. Number one stud for me has to be Nate Knight. 17 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 7 of 12 shooting, 1 of 3 on threes, 2 of 3 at the line. 1 turnover. He did commit 4 fouls in 16 minutes. He was tied for the team best plus minus with a plus 16. Really strong performance from Nate Knight. I just spent a lot of time talking about him, but good on both ends of the floor. Strong on the glass, by the way, which is one of the reasons why I think he's got a shot at sticking, not just in the league, but perhaps with the Timberwolves. The Wolves need rebounding. We can talk. This is, again, something we'll get into later in the offseason. We're not in the offseason yet, weirdly enough. I know it's unusual for the Timberwolves to not be in the offseason after the regular season finale. But I mean, like in this game, it's microcosm, right? Anthony Edwards, 0 rebounds in 18 minutes. Naz Reid, 5 rebounds in 21 minutes. Nate Knight, 8 rebounds in 16 minutes. That's important. That's a skill that the Timberwolves don't have a ton of outside of Jared Vanderbilt and Karl-Anthony Towns. And Nate Knight has rebounding and stick-to-itiveness, and he plays hard. He has all that in spades, and the Timberwolves will need that here moving forward. So he is my number one stud from this game. Number 2 for me, Jalen Noel, fantastic. 15 points in 21 minutes. He did not play. I don't think he played at all in the fourth quarter. He played quite a bit first half, third quarter. Shot 6 of 12, 3 of 5 outside the arc. Some nice long-range shooting from him. He only had 2 assists. and 0 rebounds for him as well in 21 minutes, but was okay defensively, grand scheme of things, against the Bulls. And we saw some improvements in that regard over the course of the season from Jalen Noel as well, but really on point offensively in this one. My last stud, this is a tough one between Josh Kogi and Leandro Bolmaro. I'm going to go with the Kogi. I already talked a lot about Bolmaro, and he was great in this game. But Josh Kogi, 13 points on 5 of 7, which is one of the more efficient Josh Kogi games you're ever going to see. 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block in this game. No turnovers. He can find himself to be turnover prone when he has the ball in his hands too often. He had some really nice defensive plays. The 2 steals and 1 block are obviously not it for him. And he probably should have gotten to the line a couple more times. He got to the line, shot 4 free throws, making 3. He probably should have been there a couple more times. He missed his only 3-point attempt, which was an open corner 3 that would have brought the house down at that moment in the game. Generally played well, though. Again, good defensively, solid enough offensively. Took the ball to the basket a couple of times, got a couple of and one opportunities. Of his 3 rebounds, all 3 of them were offensive rebounds. He had at least one really nice tip in at an important moment in the game as well. So a solid game. Good to see Josh Kogi play so well. And we already talked about Bolmaro, but he, if we were going to 4, he'd be the next one on the list. Hard to really pinpoint a dud in this one. I mean, like nobody really played poorly outside of the entire Wolves starting lineup in the first half. I guess if I had to single anyone out, I don't know. I guess it would be Ant. I mean, 18 minutes, 8 points on 3 of 8 shooting, 0 of 4 outside the arc, no rebounds in 18 minutes, and missed all of his 3-point attempts. I mean, hard to fault it. I just hope that like the switch that was on when he scored his career high on Thursday last week, that switch can stay on. It wasn't first half on Sunday, and I get why. And again, I guess that the argument against the argument I just made, to argue against myself here, is that when you're talking a 1-game plan, there shouldn't have to be a switch on and off. Like if you can't get up for a 1-game plan, then what are you doing in the NBA? And so I'm not at all suggesting that he's not going to be able to get up for Tuesday's game. It's just, with him, we've seen the peaks and the valleys throughout the year. Hopefully it's not a 3-point attempt fest from him Tuesday, and he has more of a balanced game against the Clippers. But that would be kind of my only real concern, headed into that game Tuesday. Speaking of Wolves Clippers, I mentioned this earlier. We're going to do the crossover with Lockdown Clippers with Chuck Mockler for Tuesday's Wolves show. Also for the Clippers show, it'll be a crossover episode, so we'll post it on both feeds. Also going to spend a segment talking to Ron Johnson of Lockdown Sports Minnesota. Of course, the former Golden Gopher wide receiver and NFL player for the Ravens. And we're going to talk Wolves Clippers as well, talk play-in. So all of that, all my analysis on that matchup is coming up Tuesday. Following the game, we'll do the live postcast over. It'll post live on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. And then following that, will be posted to all the audio platforms that you find Locked On Wolves. And then I will also do the regular post-game podcast later in the evening on Tuesday following Wolves Clippers. So tons of stuff upcoming this week. Hoping for a win. The Timberwolves then won't play till Saturday. We'll, of course, spend the rest of the week previewing. We'll also, if the Wolves win, they'll take on the Grizzlies. So undoubtedly, we'll do a Lockdown crossover with the host of Lockdown Grizzlies, Sean Coleman. And if they lose, of course, they'll play Friday, and we'll talk about that when the time comes. Hopefully, the time doesn't come. I should say if the time comes, because hopefully the Wolves win Tuesday, and we don't have to worry about it. So stay tuned on Tuesday for all that stuff. The show will be awesome on Tuesday, and then the postcast and the postgame pod and all that good stuff Tuesday night. That's all we have for you today here on the show. Thanks again for listening to Locked On Wolves. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is free and available everywhere, including Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, YouTube. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.